And before very long, he had trained his own doppelgangers or people, and started his own group of, trained his own group of black casting directors. I got to know him after doing a story about him for Emerge magazine. And we've remained friends over the years. Few years, I say maybe, well, several years later, he hired me to work on the movie Get on the Bus. Now, Reuben's rap, if I may use that expression, is filled with music and sports metaphors. Where a jazz musician, his style would be straight ahead. He would take what was passed on to him.
The avant-garde.
Add his signature, advance it, and then move it on. As in the business world, he had his own style. He had his own crossover dribble. Thank you. He had his own crossover dribble. He could take you off stride, go to the hoop, and the next thing you know, you were playing his game. Now, Reuben could be anywhere tonight based on his career. He could be at any Fortune 500 company on board of directors or at the Aspen Institute trying to solve the problems of the world. He decided to be here because Reuben has always been about giving back. And that's why he's here today, and that's why you young people should pay attention to what he has to say. His career started off as a paperboy in Chicago. And from there, he built an empire. So since we have his attention, let's give him your undivided attention. As he might say, it don't get any better than this.
Thank you, Lester. Thank you so much. This is a pleasure for me, truly a pleasure, because it's a discovery. Savannah State College is a discovery for me. So thank you, Dr. Dilger, and thank you, Lester, for inviting me. My wife, Alice, who's here with me, who's also a Wayne State graduate. We were just saying, first we weren't aware, and it's based on our own lack of information, the historical significance of Savannah State. Just in observing the campus and the wonderful reception from the faculty, I'm most impressed. I listen when with 2 ears. I'll hear something what the person's saying, but I'm also listening with what that could be. And earlier, talking to a gentleman, Dr. Vincent, the assistant, who showed us that we were in the building, and he mentioned something that I believe is the mantra, the mandate of this campus. It's not what he said, but what I paraphrased in my other ear. When he said that dreams, and he mentioned the word dreams, and he mentioned the word passport in the same sentence, and I take that to mean that is truly what this campus mantra seems to be. Passport to your dreams. And you can use that as your motto, your theme, whatever, but it's I think that's what I get a sense of. Hearing the young people sing, rehearse in the halls there, took me back to my own early beginnings, which is why I recognize I so love the arts, basically arts with young people, because there, for the grace of God, go I with a brother who's incarcerated or a young brother who's singing in the halls. Those are my options. But fortunately, I was able to sing for a short while until my voice changed to puberty and they recognized I couldn't sing. And I truly heard to say, I won a talent show, which introduced me to the arts. And at 15, my voice changed. I was no longer first tenor. I heard him say, wow, he can't sing, he can't act, we're stuck with him. And that kind of empowered me to say, I need to be on the other side of the business without making those decisions. But I've been very blessed because I've had very few careers that weren't tied to the arts. I've been very blessed also to have people that mentored me, which is why I believe in the thing I'm most proud of in my entire career is not all the stars I worked with, but those I've been able to mentor. Whether it's John Singleton, who's my intern, or the young lady who's now the senior vice president of the network, and others. That's the way I keep score, and I think that's the way most of us keep score. That's what I'm most proud of in my record, and obviously the faculty here and the students. I'll say a few more words, and I'll let Lester ask me some questions. But as I heard earlier, Dr. Dozier talking about the advent of technology and how people introduce young people, your 3-year-old son, or grandson, nephew, I don't want to give grandson, use of the iPad. And I'm marvel and I'm thrilled by what we've done with technology, especially in the way of film and cinema. But what I'm reassured about is that no matter how far we may go with technology, the human longing is for tell me a story. Tell me a story. There's a common phrase about how many people we reach. I say it's not how many you reach, how many you touch. Reaching and touching is not the same thing. You may have 1 million friends that you reach, but how many friends actually touch you? You can't get a hug from an email. You can watch an image of your own family or someone of yourself and be touched by that experience. I think I've talked to you briefly about a concept I'm working on, which would apply to everyone in this room, which is your life is a movie. Given the level of technology today, where you can shoot a movie on an iPhone, and that's a real fact. Last year's Oscar for Best Documentary was shot on an iPhone, a movie called Searching for Freedom. To get that film converted to a quality that's worthy of being theatrically released, they cost more, but you can start with an iPhone. So that's why YouTube exists. Most movies, either home movies or YouTube, fodder. The difference between that and what you pay to see is the narrative, the quality. And so your life is a story. What's great about it is you take your life, speaking of technology, didn't turn my phone off probably. You take your life and you capture it on film the way it is, or the way you would like for it to be. As filmmakers, when you're a filmmaker, you're God. It's the world you create, so you can alter the ending, the beginning, the middle, whatever it may be. I shared earlier, I think with Dr. Lloyd, something magical happened last year with a film, a documentary, or a concert movie that was released starring Justin Bieber. I didn't see the film. Actually, I did watch the movie. And what made it unique was that last year, of the 30,000 screens that exist in America, 500 were capable of digital projections versus the traditional film cans. By the end of this year, 80%, maybe 90% of all theaters in America will have digital capacity for releasing films. But what made that film unique is that they were able to alter the content while it was still in the theaters. So the box office revenue went up because the little girls who went to see it, the young fans went to see the movie 2 or 3 times because there were new elements they hadn't seen. There were 5 new songs. Well, taking that concept with your home movies, with your life, this is where my life is now, but I'm going to alter the elements and create a new ending, a new middle. Comedy becomes tragedy, tragedy becomes romance. So I get excited about what we can do. Once again, it comes back to the narrative. Tell me a story. Tell me a story. It's something humankind. So as far as we may go with technology, I'm reassured by the capacity and the human heart to be the need for a story.
Tell us your story.
My story.
You started out in Chicago.
I was born in Chicago in 1946.
And your mentors were?
Well, I tell the story, I'll tell you the summary, that when I went to Universal Studios to start working in the mailroom, I said everything I needed to know about working in the Universal mailroom, which was called the Executive Training Program, but you were a mail boy. But you had to wear a suit every day, because they considered you part of executive management. And each week, you were delivering mail to a different department. 1 week, you may be delivering mail to the special effects department. Next week, you're delivering mail to the producer's row, which had Alfred Hitchcock, and actor's row, Paul Newman, Steve McQueen. So that was your route, music department. In Chicago, as a paper boy, there were 3 rules that you needed to obey, not just to be successful, but just to stay alive. The 3 rules were deliver the paper every day, promptly, without excuse or without any apologies, deliver the paper. Now in Chicago, you know, is the ice age at times, you know, with the snow, but there's no excuse, you must deliver the paper. So delivering the paper every day, being responsible. Second rule is get to know your customers. If you know your customer, you can't collect from the customer. If you don't know them, you ever need a relationship, how to communicate. And the third rule is most important: don't get robbed. Yeah, that's a real issue on the south side of Chicago. I was fortunate to have on my paper route John Johnson Publishing. I grew up in a housing project on 22nd Street, and Johnson Publishing was on 18th Street. Chicago Defender was on 24th Street in Michigan. So on the route, I had John Sinstack from the Chicago Defender. I had John Johnson from Johnson Publishing, and Jesse Owens, who had a PR firm called Owens West. So I saw black men running businesses. So even though I lived in a project and my father had died, I didn't, I had a North Star. I had an image I could glom onto, which is why when we see someone that looks like you doing something you aspire to do, just their very presence can impact your life, and it did mine. And John Johnson was very instructive. I didn't do that version. I did the Harry Mason movie of the week stuff. I did do those. I did Ironside. And the way that came about, because first, let me go back to how I came to be hired from the mailroom into casting. The policy of the studio was that positions would come available on the studio lot. If there's positions for a business affairs training position in the accounting department, casting department. And because which is why you're delivering mail, you're being observed by the department heads. So when you go in for your interview, there's already some association. The job was posted for a casting director trainee. Up to this point, there had never been a black casting director in Hollywood ever. And 3 people went up for the job. And you're supposed to bring in 2 letters of reference. John David, whose father was Hal David of the composing team back in David, he was chosen to go in. I applied for it. And Jay Hypers, whose father was Yasha Hypers. They had letters of recommendation, obviously from the highest positions in Hollywood and national. I decided to go on the strength of my resume and my character. I did not take any reference. I'm going to call Pee Wee, give me a reference. Call Junebug to say Reuben is cool. But I knew my resume was qualified. On the basis of my resume, I was most qualified, having my theater experience in Chicago. The gentleman who interviewed me, name was Ralph Winters. I was the last to go in for the interview. He said, Reuben, I've seen you delivering mail here in the casting department. I'm impressed with the way you conduct yourself. But these other 2 gentlemen have letters of recommendations that are very impressive. If I have political ambitions, I have to hire one of them instead of you, even though you're more qualified. But for the first time in my career, because I'm going to retire in 2 years, I'm going to do what's right and what's fair. And he hired me. I became assistant to his secretary, sat behind her and typed contracts and listened on the phones and how deals were negotiated. Universal Studios at the time was the largest supplier of television shows in the industry. Columbo, all those shows were produced by Universal Studios. So the casting department was quite large. There were 8 casting directors in the department. And I was at the beck and call of all 8, tracking down the film. And this was before this was going back in the days with Moviola. I had to go into the film vault, retrieve the film, mark it, take it to projection, use cams, and 4 and 5 for each casting director. Which helped feed my knowledge of actors, along my own personal diet of 2 films a week, 2 plays a week, and 20 hours of television. I was determined when I did become a casting director, no one in the room would know more about actors than me. 8 casting directors in this department. There was a producer on the lot named Cy Sherman. They had fired every casting director in the department. There was no one else left to fire. He was just a bombastic type of producer. So Ralph Winters, the department head, said, Reuben, I'm going to take over the show. I don't do casting. I want you to be ready in 3 or 4 months, 6 months. I was ready in 3 months. I did the show for the next 3 years. These things come full circle. Years later, that producer came to me for a job. Years later, I hired Ralph and his daughter for a miniseries, The Winds of War. There's a karmic connection that shows up in these things. But that was preparation for the opportunity. I stayed on the it wasn't there because I was just, I wouldn't have stayed for years if I didn't know more than anyone in the room about interest.
You had set your own agenda for what you had to know and what you had to do, as opposed to being told. No one told you to see 20, how many films did you see a week?
20 hours of TV a week,
Okay.
2 films a week, and 2 plays a week.
And where did that come from?
Just, just knowing that what looked around what other people were doing. I mean, and here's once again, I would be, I didn't have a car. I mean, my wonderful wife, I'm in LA. I'm executive in training. I don't have a car. God gave me a beautiful bride who worked in transportation, so public transportation was not an insult. Alice and I, we dated on the bus. We rode the bus to Venice Beach. And I didn't lose any cool points for that. We actually used tokens. So that's love. Thank you, sweetheart. Imagine today, so we're going to take the bus here, we're going to take the bus there, So, so therefore, having grown up in Chicago maybe twice as fast, I was a father at 17.
And your baby went to?
My daughter attended my high school graduation. It takes a while to wrap your mind around that. So, a lot of life experiences I already had in Chicago when I went to Hollywood. So, while others were playing, I was just acquiring knowledge. I mean, at that time, UCLA was giving free courses in film accounting. Free. It was a real shock. Some of the jazz concerts. Free. So I the idea of on a weekend going to a party or something was the last thing I wanted to do. I was intrigued. I thought getting paid to learn about the film industry, to get involved in making films and watching people talk that you admired about their craft.
We have to advance the ball a little bit here.
Yeah, let's move into the 70s or 80s or something.
Colors, black and white. Oprah. A student in my class the other day said, how could he have hired Oprah for
Color Purple.
Color Purple? She had no training. That's not true, is it?
Not true at all. I was casting Richard Pryor's movie, JoJo Dance Your Life is Calling, that Richard was directing. And I had to I was doing a national talent search to find a little boy, 8 or 9 years old, that could curse the way Richard Pryor cursed when he was a little boy. And in LA, the kids weren't quite angry enough. So I decided to go to Chicago, New York. So I was in New York auditioning. Young men come in to play Richard Pryor's little boy. And I received a call from Quincy Jones, who was in Chicago, being deposed because a young lady said she had a baby named Billie Jean, and Michael Jackson was the father. So Quincy had to talk and go and say, look, Billie Jean was created in the studio, was not, you can sue anybody, as you know. So, but he called and said, I'm watching television. I'm looking at a young lady named Oprah Winfrey that can be right for Sophia. I said, well, I'll be going to Chicago and I'll leave New York to meet some young actors for JoJo Dancer. He was also scoring JoJo Dancer. And I'll meet with her. So I called her studio, spoke to her producer, Debbie Dozier, and didn't tell her I was coming to Chicago for. I said, I've heard about first, would you send me an audio tape or an acting tape? Not a tape of her on TV posting. And she sent me a VHS copy of a one-woman show that Oprah had toured, where she portrayed various black historical figures: Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, Mary McLeod Bethune. I was most impressed. I pride myself on knowing 90% of the black actors in this country at that time, and pretty high percentage of all the white actors. But here was someone I didn't know. It was very impressive. So we arranged to meet in Chicago that Sunday. I'm from Chicago. It was so cold, my family didn't even come out to the hotel to see. We stay there, we stay here, we stay warm. And she came, it was a North Michigan Avenue office I was using. And she came, and I answered the door. She knocked, she says, I'm here to see Reuben Cannon. I said, I'm Reuben Cannon. She said, look, mister, I have 103 temperature. I don't have time for games. I want to meet Reuben Cannon. In her mind, she didn't think Reuben Cannon was a black man. She didn't, the idea, at that point, I was looking quite a resume, the idea of the things I've done. And I said, you need to see my license. And she caught herself, and we began the conversation and a friendship that has endured to this day. So I was my introduction to her was as an actress, not as a talk show host. And she said to me, she tells the story one way, I tell it another. Okay. She said, I'm destined to play Sophia. I said, why is that? She said, well, because Harpo spelled backwards is Oprah. I said, well, that's cute. I'll be sure to tell Alfie Woodard that. Who was also candidate for the role. And so there's been the casting of Color Purple. Someone just told me last week, Oprah told a story about how she came to be cast. And she's done, I was on her show, Alice and I were there for the 25th anniversary. And the other actors on the program talked about how they came to be cast and how I might have been direct in my response to them. So afterwards, I said to Oprah, hearing the other actors, hearing Margaret Avery speak about how I came to hire her and how I first, and the others, perhaps I might have said to you, don't call me. I'll call you. I said, I know I denied it, but, and she called in the film crew and said, I want to get this on tape. So I saw it was on one of those shows where Reuben confesses to dissing her. But it's been a friend we produced together. She's been an investor. She was one of the primary investors in one of the Armalus movie I produced that I'm very proud of. But she's her energy, her spirit, and her acting craft. I thought she was terrific in the button. I mean, and the reason because I didn't, her persona is so big that she made you forget that she was Oprah. She was that character, and that's how I judge it.
Let's talk about a few other films that you made, and perhaps get on to what's another film that you made that you found yourself challenged in ways in which you hadn't been challenged before?
Well, one was, I was just telling this to my daughter, was the largest miniseries ever made for television. I had to draft the hiring format for it. It's called The Winds of War, based on Herman Wouk's book. Nothing had ever been done where you have to hire an actor for a year without committing him to a series, because the scheduling was intermediate, so you have to hire an actor for a year. And there was nothing in the SAG, there was nothing in SAG that covered that hiring arrangement. So I drafted a format for that. But what made it challenging was working with a director who was very insensitive and who didn't really, with his people skills were high. And this is where, diplomacy, because you have two instincts. One, to retaliate, physically cursing, or to just create a zen space and let that person deflate himself. So that was, you can only do that for so long, because at some point, the project is going to show up. The project in you is going to come out. Unless you've got someone coaching you, said, no, keep the project, keep Junior back here. We can't leave Junior alone. And I didn't have a lot of that. I was, so the stress. So that was Winds of War, probably been the most difficult assignment I had. Color Purple was one of the easiest work with Spielberg. I find that the people who were the most talented have the least amount of issues and stress. I mean, Steven said to me, Reuben, I hire the best people that do what they do, which is kind of what I do. The guy who hired me, Ralph Winters, gave me the concept that I use in everything that I've done in the industry, in many areas of life. He says, he had been casting for 25 years. He says, the rule that I use is to hire actors that are superior to the role they have to play. I've used that concept, not only just with actors, but in all my crew and my staff and writers, everything. Superior to what they have to do. Not adequate, superior to what they have to do. Therefore, the energy never drops. If you got the guy playing cop number one, or nurse number two, the one-line role is equal to the guy who's playing the lead. So the intensity of the energy, you look at Color Purple, every role in that movie is impeccably cast, not, because the actors are so good. Small roles. Same with the crew, the DP on Get on the Bus. Across the board, higher superior to what they have to do.
The Ray Charles test. Tell them about that, and then we have to start
Okay.
asking questions.
All right. What happens when you're in casting, you hear a role, you hear an actor audition so many times that you develop like a 10-year. You can anticipate, So I developed what I call my concept, the Ray Charles test. And the reason I said it because the song American Beautiful, we all sing in school, boring song. You would never sing that song if it weren't required in school. Ray Charles records it, all of a sudden it becomes your favorite song. It's like you want to go buy a war bond, you want to just become the most patriotic person. So, the most boring material through the prism of the genius takes on new life. So my Ray Charles theory, I was casting a TV pilot called Moonlighting. And it was a script. No casting had been done. Sybil Shepherd had signed on early, but we needed to find a guy to play opposite her. And it had to be a chemistry that was so dynamic that it would lift the material to the level. I had hired 7 other casting directors around the country to find this actor. At a certain point, there are no secrets. Young actor in his late 20s, early 30s that can do comedy. Now, the myth was that Bruce Willis was a bartender and he just made the stuff up. Now, that series was scripted. So I'd been to New York to audition and saw a few actors, but there was a Sam Shepard play that Bruce was understudying, so I did not see him perform. I came back to LA and continued to audition, and an agent, a friend of mine, called and said, "Reuben, when you were in New York, you missed seeing Bruce Willis. He's in town. Would you meet with him?" I said, "Sure." Came by. We sat and talked. Looked at his very impressive resume. I gave him a script. I said, "Meet me at 3:30 at ABC Network." Gave him the scenes. Now, I'd heard this scene read 500-600 times, so I knew in my head I was reading opposite the actor. Bruce came in. It was a Ray Charles experience, like hearing it for the first time. You got a preview of what the series could be. Even with my reading opposite him, which was not as good as it would be with, obviously, when Sybil played the part. And took him to the network. The president of the network said, "Reuben, you obviously do not know what a leading man is. This guy's not a leading man. He doesn't know he's a star. The guy's a star." I said, "Well, you let him be a star, but you're fired off the project." The only time I've ever been replaced on as a casting director or anything in my life. But I took it in stride. I've replaced people on projects, so I know that's the game, So the person he hired to replace me, I knew he was a friend. I said, "Look, take their money. I've seen the world. There's nobody out there." While they were doing their own search, we did a screen. We filmed one scene with Sybil and Bruce. Used that scene, cut it together, which was a real, and took that back to the network. The president saw it, liked it, wasn't sure yet. Arranged a test screening and asked the audience one question: "Would you watch this man on TV every week?" The answer was yes. And the series was launched. I was rehired, got my bonus, got my money, and worked at the show doing the entire life. It was a great experience. So that was, so I still use that, something introduced in a way you haven't heard before. Roots was completed. The plan was for it to air 1 episode a month. It was 12 episodes, one episode a month, right? When Fred Silverman saw it, he says, "This is awful. Let's put it on and get it off as soon as possible." Thus, 7 days straight. Final episode, to this day, one of the largest viewerships in the history of, mass students. Tell me if I'm right. It's still number 1, right? Most watched show. But that's a fluke. And that became the format for miniseries, But Roots was not aired doing sweeps. Show like that, if you believe in it, you put it on in February, you put it on the things. Flukes.
One question.
Yes, sir.
One question.
Just say it and tell your name, please.
My name is James Bennett, senior at Cook University, author of 21 Truths of Black America. My question to you as a casting director and executive producer: why is it that every Black actor at some
I don't think that's true. We're great actor. I don't think you've ever seen Cindy Poitier in a dress or Denzel or Morgan Freeman in a dress. And God forbid you should ever, see, some of the other characters in the dress. I think there has been a history, you're right, whether it's Flip Wilson going back to the Flip Wilson show with Geraldine, parodying comedy is hard. I'm not making apologies for the Medea character. But of the 10 movies I produced, in 7 years with Tyler, only 4 of those featured Medea. And I think, it's my theory, that the reason of the genres of films preferred by African Americans, comedy is the most preferred. Drama is the least preferred. And part of it is that we're not lacking for drama in our life experiences. Okay. So if you have a chance to have 2 hours of escape, see it as entertainment, as opposed to being reminded of whatever your current struggles may be, that's the comedy. So I don't, I would be concerned if it was a movement, if all of a sudden there was an annual Medea parade, if there was an annual Geraldine parade. I don't think it's a movement. I think it's a moment. I think this year has been a bonanza in filmmaking. 12 Years a Slave, The Butler, Right Along last week, About Last Night. Upcoming this year will be Think Like a Man Part 2. So I think we see an alteration. When I made Why They Get Married Part 1, that was a movie that crossed over. It was a Tyler Perry movie that crossed over within the culture because it was a movie about 4 black professionals struggling with the issues of marriage and career like anyone else. So there, an audience discovered a different dynamic of a Tyler Perry film. When I first went to work for Tyler, I gave him a copy of Walt Disney's book, Triumph of the American Imagination. To make the comparison, that Walt Disney started out with a mouse and built an empire from that. Tyler started out with a Medea and be diverse in the content he created. And I think he's done that. I left the studio in 2011, and I continue to wish them well.
Let's thank our guests.